The command came quietly, but it landed like a punch. Move to the back, now. On Christmas Eve, inside a $50 million private jet, a black woman was ordered out of seat 1A, while snow hammered the windows and the engines idled on the tarmac. Passengers watched as the pilot stood over her, confident, smug, certain he was putting the help in her place. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She simply looked down, unbuckled, and stood. What the pilot didn't know, what turned this humiliation into a catastrophe, was that the woman he dismissed owned the aircraft beneath his feet. And before the night was over, this flight wouldn't just be delayed. It would expose fraud, end a career, and rewrite who truly held power in the sky. The wind howled across the tarmac of Teterboro Airport, whipping the falling snow into frantic, ghostly spirals. It was 10:30 p.m. on Christmas Eve. The air was biting, the kind of cold that seeped through layers of cashmere and settled deep in the bones. But inside the cabin of the Gulfstream G650 ER tail number N7.12JV, the atmosphere was perfectly pressurized, scented with a faint hint of white tea and thyme. Juliana Vance adjusted the hood of her oversized charcoal grey university sweatshirt. She pulled it lower over her eyes, sinking deeper into the hand-stitched leather of seat 1A. To the untrained eye, or perhaps the prejudiced one, she looked nothing like the founder and CEO of Vance Halloway Dynamics, the defense contracting firm that had just secured a historic $11 billion contract with the Pentagon. To the untrained eye, she looked like a tired woman in sweatpants, and that was exactly how she wanted it. She had spent the last 72 hours in a windowless boardroom in D.C., running on espresso, and adrenaline finalizing the merger that would solidify her legacy. She was exhausted, her bones ASHD. All she wanted was to fly home to Aspen, drink a glass of the 1982 Patrick, sitting in the galley, and sleep for 14 hours. She hadn't booked her usual flight crew. Her regular pilot, Dave, was home with his newborn twins, a leave she had insisted he take. This charter was managed by Sterling Aviation, a high-end service her assistant Sarah had sworn by. They're the best for last-minute logistics, Juliana. Sarah had said top-tier discretion. Juliana shifted, tucking her legs beneath her. She checked her phone. No signal yet. The plane was still running on the Auxiliary Power Unit APU, the low hum vibrating against the soles of her sneakers. She closed her eyes. "Excuse me?" The voice was deep-clipped and dripping with an impatience that shattered her momentary peace. Juliana opened one eye. Standing over her was the captain. He was a tall man, jawline, sharp enough to cut glass, with salt and pepper hair perfectly coiffed. His uniform was immaculate, the gold bars on his epaulettes gleaming under the LED cabin lights. His name tag read, C.T. Marcus Sterling. Yes. Juliana asked, her voice raspy from lack of sleep. Captain Sterling didn't make eye contact. He was looking past her, scanning the cabin as if checking for dust. "I need you to clear this seat." Now, Juliana blinked, straightening up slightly. "Excuse me? You heard me?" Sterling said, finally deigning to look at her. His eyes were cold blue ice. "This seat is reserved for the principal passenger. The jump seat in the back is open, or you can sit in the galley area if you prefer, but one is off limits." Juliana frowned. The confusion was genuine. "I think there's a misunderstanding. I am the principal passenger." Sterling let out a short, derisive scoff. He looked her up and down, his gaze lingering on her worn sneakers and the fraying aglet on her hoodie string. It was a look Juliana knew well. It was the look she received when she walked into high-end jewelry stores on Fifth Avenue without makeup. It was the look of someone assessing value and finding a deficit. "Look," Miss Sterling said, dropping his voice to a patronizing register. "I don't know who put you up to this, or if you're part of the cleaning crew waiting for a ride-along, but let's be clear. This is a $65 million aircraft. The client who chartered this jet is a high net-worth individual who expects perfection. That means seat 1A remains pristine." Juliana felt a spark of heat in her chest, a familiar fire that had fueled her rise from the projects of Detroit to the cover of Forbes. "I chartered at this jet." she said, her voice steady but hardening. "My name is on the manifest, Juliana Vance." Sterling paused. For a second, a flicker of doubt crossed his face, but it was quickly extinguished by arrogance. He pulled a tablet from under his arm and tapped the screen aggressively. "The manifest lists a Javance," he muttered, "and I was informed by dispatch that the client is a tech mogul, a billionaire." He looked up, eyebrows raised. "You're telling me you are the billionaire I am?" Juliana said. Sterling laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. It was a bark. "Right? And I'm the King of England. Listen, sweetheart. I don't have the time for games. We have a slot time in 20 minutes. Clears throat. "I have a real VIP arriving any second, M. Clarissa Davenport. She specifically requested the forward cabin." Juliana's mind raced. Clarissa Davenport. The name sounded familiar, but she couldn't place it. "I don't know who that is, but I booked this entire plane. It's a private charter. There are no other passengers. Miss Davenport is a guest of the owner." Sterling lied smoothly. "This is a Sterling Aviation aircraft. We retain the right to utilize empty legs for company VIPs. Now move. I won't ask again." It was a bold-faced lie. Juliana knew aviation law. She knew charter contracts better than most lawyers. When you book a private charter, you buy the block time. You own the cabin for that duration. No company VIPs unless authorized. But then she realized something. He didn't know the plane belonged to her holding company. Sterling Aviation was just the management firm she utilized for logistics when her internal team was off. Technically, her holding company leased the jet to Sterling, who then chartered it back to her for tax purposes. It was a common, complex arrangement, but the bottom line was simple. She owned the metal he was standing on. She looked at Sterling, really looked at him. Clears throat. This wasn't just about a seat. This was about power. This was about a man who looked at a black woman in a hoodie and decided she didn't belong in the front of the bus or the jet. "Captain Sterling," Juliana said, unbuckling her seatbelt but remaining seated. "I'm going to give you one chance to check your tablet again. Check the ownership registration of this tail number." Sterling rolled his eyes, checking his Rolex. "I don't need to check registration. I fly this bird 3 times a week. I know who owns it. A holding company out of Delaware. Faceless investors." He leaned in closer, invading her personal space. "Now get your things and move to the back, or I will have security escort you off the tarmac. It's Christmas Eve. Do you really want to spend it in a holding cell in New Jersey?" The threat hung in the air, heavy and toxic. Juliana took a deep breath. She could pull out her phone call, the CEO of Sterling Aviation, and have this man fired before the engine spooled up. She could reveal who she was right now. But the real VIP comment stuck with her. Clarissa Davenport. Who was she? And why was this captain willing to kick a paying passenger, even one he thought was a nobody, out of her seat for this woman? A dark curiosity took hold of Juliana. If she revealed herself now, he would just apologize gravel, and she'd never know the extent of the rot in his operation. But if she played along, if she let him dig his grave, she stood up slowly. "Fine," she whispered, keeping her eyes downcast. "I don't want any trouble." Sterling smirked, a victorious curl of the lip that made Juliana's stomach turn. "Smart choice. The jump seat is behind the galley curtain." Clears throat. "Keep the curtain closed. Miss Davenport values her privacy." Juliana grabbed her battered leather duffel bag. She walked past him, smelling his cologne, overpowering musk, and expensive tobacco. As she squeezed past the galley and into the cramped, stiff jump seat, usually reserved for flight attendants, she felt the vibration of the aircraft change. The stairs were retracting. Through the gap in the curtain, she saw the cabin door open one last time before sealing. A gust of snow blew in, followed by a woman. Clarissa Davenport was stunning in a superficial, manufactured way. She was draped in a white mink coat that cost more than most people's cars. She had platinum blonde hair and was carrying a small, yapping Pomeranian. "Marcus, darling," Clarissa squealed, throwing her arms around the captain's neck. Sterling caught her, his demeanor transforming instantly from icy tyrant to charming lover. Merry Christmas, babe. I told you I'd get you to Aspen in style. I can't believe you pulled this off. Clarissa giggled, tossing her mink coat onto seat 1A, Juliana's seat. You said the client was some boring corporate suit. Some nobody, Sterling said loud enough for his voice to carry to the back. I moved her to the back. She won't bother us. It's just you and me up here. Juliana sat in the dark, cramped jump seat, her hands clenching the armrests until her knuckles turned white. He wasn't just racist. He was stealing the flight. He was using her plane, her fuel, and her time to fly his mistress to Aspen for a romantic getaway, all while treating the actual owner like stowaway luggage. Juliana pulled out her phone. She had 1 bar of signal. She opened her secure messaging app and typed a message to her chief of security, a former Navy SEAL named Elias Thorne. Message: I'm on N712 JV. Captain Marcus Sterling has commandeered the flight for personal use. I have been moved to the jump seat. Do not intervene yet. I want to see how far this goes, but have a team meet us on the tarmac in Aspen and call the airport authority in Colorado. I want the police waiting. She hit send just as the engines roared to life. The plane began to taxi. Juliana leaned her head back against the cold wall of the fuselage. Merry Christmas, Marcus. She thought, a cold smile touching her lips. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. The G650ER accelerated down the runway, the force pushing Juliana into the uncomfortable seat as they lifted off into the snowy night, leaving the lights of New Jersey behind. The drama was only just beginning. Up in the air at 45,000 FT, there was nowhere to run, and Juliana Vance was about to turn this flight into a masterclass in karma. The aircraft climbed steeply, punching through the heavy cloud layer over the northeast. The turbulence was nasty at first, sharp jolts that rattled the galley latches. But as the Gulf Ream leveled off at cruising altitude, the ride smoothed out into that signature glass-like glide of a heavy jet. From her vantage point in the jump seat, Juliana was effectively invisible. The heavy velvet curtain separating the galley from the main cabin was drawn, but not fully closed. A 2-in gap offered her a perfect view of the forward cabin. She watched as Captain Sterling emerged from the cockpit. He shouldn't have been back there. At this altitude, he should be monitoring the instruments, especially in winter weather. But the co-pilot, a young man Juliana didn't recognize, was clearly left to handle the controls alone. Sterling walked to the credenza and popped a bottle of Dom Perrin. Juliana narrowed her eyes. That was her vintage stock, reserved for board members. To us, Sterling said, pouring 2 flutes. He handed one to Clarissa, who was now lounging in seat 1A, her feet propped up on the opposing Ottoman shoes still on. To us, Clarissa clinked her glass against his. God, Marcus, this is the life. When are you going to leave that airline gig and fly private full-time? You fit in here so much better. Sterling took a sip, leaning against the bulkhead with practiced ease. Soon, babe. I'm working on something. I've got the ear of the management at Sterling. They trust me. I'm thinking of starting my own brokerage. With the connections I'm making, I'll be buying my own G650 in 5 years. Juliana stifled a laugh. 5 years. On a pilot's salary, even a good one. He wouldn't be able to afford the fuel for a G650 for a year, let alone the hull. What about the passenger? Clarissa asked, lowering her voice slightly, though not enough. The scrub in the back, is she going to complain? Sterling waved a hand dismissively. Her, please. She's some mid-level clears throat manager or assistant, probably flying on a company perk. She was terrified of me. People like that, they're used to being told what to do. They don't fight back, especially when they know they don't belong. Juliana felt the anger simmering, but she forced it down. She needed more. She needed to know how deep this corruption went. She pulled out her phone again. The onboard Wi-Fi had kicked in. Clear's throat. She logged into the Vance Global internal server. She navigated to the asset management dashboard. She pulled up the billing logs for Sterling Aviation. She began to cross-reference. Flight 409 Deck 12, Miami. Flight 332, Nov 28, Las Vegas. She looked at the passenger manifests for those dates. They listed J. Vance as the primary, but Juliana knew for a fact she had been in London on November 28th. Her eyes widened. Sterling wasn't just stealing this flight. He had been using her aircraft as his personal taxi service for months. He was listing her as the passenger to bill her company for the fuel and crew time, then flying his friends or clients around. He was embezzling flight hours. Each hour on a G6 and 50 cost roughly $10,000 in direct operating costs. He had logged over $40 of fraudulent flights. That was nearly $500,000 of theft, not including the wear and tear on the engines. "Babe, I'm hungry," Clarissa wed. "What's on the menu, whatever you want," Sterling said. He walked over to the galley, pushing the curtain aside. Juliana froze. She looked up at him. Sterling stared down at her, his expression shifting from lover-boy charm to annoyance. "You," he barked. "Get up." Juliana didn't move. "Excuse me," I said, "get up. Miss Davenport wants the catering plated. The flight attendant called in sick, so you're going to help out." Juliana looked at him incredulous. "You want me to serve you dinner? Unless you want to pay for this seat?" Sterling sneered. "Technically, since I'm the captain, I can designate you as crew to justify your presence on the manifest if questions arise. So be crew. Plate the food, bring it out, and don't make eye contact with Ms. Davenport. She doesn't like being stared at." This was it, the breaking point. Or it should have been. But Juliana saw an opportunity. If she served them, she could get close. She could hear everything, and she could make sure the service was something they would never forget. "Okay," Juliana said softly. "I'll do it." Sterling nodded, satisfied. "Good girl. Catering trays are in the chiller. Don't mess it up." He turned and went back to Clarissa. Juliana stood up. She walked to the galley counter. She opened the chiller. Inside were trays of lobster Thermidor Wagyu beef sliders and truffle risotto. She began to arrange the food on the fine china. As she worked, her movements were precise, mechanical, but her mind was miles away coordinating with Elias. Incoming message from Elias Thorne. "We have confirmed the fraud. Audit team is pulling the logs now. NYPD and FBI are notified for jurisdiction upon return, but Aspen police are waiting for your arrival." "Do you want us to ground the plane remotely?" Juliana typed back. "No, let him land. I want him to think he got away with it until the moment the stairs drop. I want to see the look on his face." She finished plating the food. She didn't spit in it. She was too classy for that. And besides, the food was innocent. But she did take the bottle of Chateau Margaux meant for the main course and hid it. She replaced it with a bottle of Tabukchuk cooking wine she found in the back of the pantry cupboard, pouring it into the expensive decanter. She carried the silver tray out into the cabin. Clarissa was taking a selfie, holding the champagne glass up to the light. "Oh, finally," she said, not looking at Juliana. "Put it there." Juliana set the tray down on the fold-out table. "Is there anything else, ma'am?" Juliana asked, her voice flat. Clarissa looked up, her nose wrinkling. "Yes, you can turn down the lights and then disappear. You're ruining the vibe." Sterling chuckled, reaching for a slider. "You heard the lady? Go back to your hole." Juliana bowed her head slightly. "As you wish, Captain." She retreated to the galley, closing the curtain tight. She sat back down in the jump seat, her heart pounding not with fear, but with anticipation. She checked the flight map on her phone. 2 hours to Aspen. 2 hours until the hammer dropped. But the universe, it seemed, had one more twist in store before they touched down. The plane suddenly lurched. Not a bit of turbulence, but a violent, stomach-churning drop. The engines wed the pitch, changing from a hum to a scream. The curtain flew open. Sterling ran past her, his face pale, heading for the cockpit. "What's happening?" Clarissa screamed from the main cabin. "Marcus." Juliana unbuckled and stood up. She braced herself against the galley wall as the plane banked hard to the left. She looked toward the cockpit. The door was open. The young co-pilot was shouting, "Captain Master warning. We lost hydraulic system left. And I'm getting a fire warning on engine 1. Juliana's blood ran cold. This wasn't a game anymore. This wasn't about karma or revenge. This was a G650 with an engine fire over the Midwest in the middle of a snowstorm. Sterling threw himself into the left seat, grabbing the yoke. "Shut it down. Fire suppression bottle 1. Juliana moved. She didn't think. She just reacted. She walked into the main cabin. Clarissa was hyperventilating, clutching her Pomeranian, tears streaming down her face. "We're going to die!" Clarissa shrieked. "We're going to die!" "Shut up," Juliana said, her voice commanding and calm. It was the voice of a CEO who had navigated market crashes and hostile takeovers. "Put your oxygen mask on now." Clarissa froze, looking at Juliana. For the first time, she didn't see a nobody in a hoodie. She saw authority. She fumbled for the mask that had dropped from the ceiling. Juliana didn't sit down. She walked to the cockpit door. "Captain," she said, her voice cutting through the alarms. "Status." Sterling didn't look back. He was wrestling with the stick. "Get back. We're declaring an emergency. Diverting to damn it. Everything is socked in. Chicago is 0 visibility. Des Moines." Juliana said, "Des Moines is clear. I checked the weather charts before we took off. Runway 31 is 9,000 FT. It can take us." Sterling whipped his head around, sweat beading on his forehead. "How the hell do you know that?" "Because I'm a pilot," Juliana lied. Well, half lied. She had her private license, though she rarely flew jets. "And because I own this plane, Marcus, I know what it can do. You lost the left hydraulic. You still have the aux pump. Drop the gear manually if you have to, but get this bird on the ground." Sterling stared at her. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The name J. Vance, the knowledge of the systems, the authority. "You?" he stammered. "Your eyes on the instruments, Captain," Juliana shouted. "Fly the damn plane. We can discuss my employment review if we survive the landing." Sterling turned back to the window, his hands shaking. But he listened. He banked the plane toward Des Moines. The next 20 minutes were a blur of terrifying descents and blaring alarms. Juliana strapped herself into the jump seat, closing her eyes, praying to a god she hadn't spoken to in years. "If we make it," she promised, "I'm going to ruin him, but please let us make it." The wheels slammed onto the tarmac of Des Moines International. The plane skidded and the thrust reverses roaring on the one good engine. It fishtailed on the icy runway, sliding sideways, snow spraying up over the windows. Then silence. The plane came to a halt. For a moment, nobody moved. The only sound was the heavy breathing of the 4 people on board and the whimper of the Pomeranian. Then the cockpit door opened. Sterling stepped out. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. He looked at Juliana. She was unbuckling her seatbelt, her face an unreadable mask of stone. "Ms. Vance." Sterling whispered, his voice trembling. Juliana stood up. She smoothed her hoodie. She walked past him, ignoring him completely, and opened the main cabin door. The cold Iowa air rushed in, smelling of ozone and burnt rubber. "Get the stairs down," she said over her shoulder, "and get the police. We have a lot to talk about." The silence on the runway was shattered by the wail of sirens. Red and blue lights fractured the snowy darkness, reflecting off the aluminum skin of the Gulf Ream like a disco ball in a nightmare. Juliana Vance stood at the bottom of the air stairs, her sneakers sinking into a mixture of slush and firefighting foam. The cold was absolute, a distinct Iowa freeze that bit exposed skin instantly, but Juliana didn't feel it. Adrenaline was a powerful insulator. Behind her, Captain Marcus Sterling stumbled down the stairs. The swagger was gone. The arrogance that had filled the cabin at 40,000 FT had evaporated, replaced by the shaky legs of a man who had just looked death in the face. Clarissa followed, shivering violently in her mink coat. The Pomeranian tucked under her arm, whining softly. The young co-pilot, whose name Juliana learned was Eric, brought up the rear, looking like a ghost. A battalion of emergency vehicles surrounded them. Firefighters in heavy gear were already spraying the left engine, which was smoking ominously. A convoy of black SUVs and police cruisers pulled up to the perimeter, their tires crunching on the ice. A burly fire chief approached them, his breath puffing in the air. "Everyone okay? Any injuries?" "We're fine," Sterling said, trying to muster his command voice. He straightened his tie instinctively, trying to reclaim the narrative. "I'm Captain Sterling. We had a catastrophic failure of the #1 engine and hydraulic loss. I managed to bring her down. We need transport to the FBO immediately for my passenger." He gestured to Clarissa. The fire chief nodded. "Good flying, Cap. We'll get you inside. Signature Flight Support has a van on the way." Sterling turned to Juliana, his eyes narrowing. He grabbed her arm, his grip tight. "Listen to me." He hissed low enough so the firefighters wouldn't hear. "You keep your mouth shut about what happened up there. You talk to nobody. I'll handle the authorities. If you say one word about the catering or the seat, I'll have you blacklisted from every charter agency in the country. Do you understand?" Juliana looked at his hand on her arm. Then she looked at his face. It was the face of a man who still thought he held the cards. He thought this was just a bad flight. He didn't realize the game board had been flipped. "Let go of me," Juliana said. "It wasn't a request. I said, get your hands off her." The voice boomed from the other side of the fire trucks. A man in a dark trench coat, flanked by 2 uniformed police officers, strode through the slush. It was Elias Thorne, her chief of security. He must have been tracking the transponder and scrambled a local team the second they squawked 7700 emergency. Sterling blinked confused. "Who are you?" "This is a secure scene." Elias ignored him. He walked straight to Juliana. "Ms. Vance, are you injured?" "I'm fine." "Elias, clear his throat," Juliana said, brushing slush off her sweatpants, just cold and very, very disappointed. Sterling froze. Vance is Vance. He looked from Elias to Juliana, the gears finally turning in his panicked brain. The manifest. J. Vance, the woman in the hoodie, the billionaire. Officer Juliana said, pointing a steady finger at Sterling. "I want this man detained immediately." Sterling laughed nervously, backing up toward Clarissa. "Detained? For what I just saved your life. I landed a burning plane. You're being detained for grand larceny fraud endangerment and the unauthorized use of a movable asset." Juliana said, her voice cutting through the wind. "And that's just for starters." "You can't be serious," Clarissa screeched, stepping forward. "Do you know who he is? He's a hero. And who are you?" "The maid." Juliana turned her gaze to Clarissa. It was a look of such withering pity that Clarissa actually took a step back. "I am the owner of this aircraft," Juliana said. "And you, Miss Davenport, are trespassing." A police officer stepped forward, handcuffs glinting in the strobe lights. "Marcus Sterling." "Now hold on a second," Sterling shouted, raising his hands. "This is a civil matter. She's crazy. I'm the captain of this vessel." "Not anymore," Juliana said. "You're fired. And since we are on the ground, you are now just a man who stole a $65 million jet to impress his girlfriend." The officer didn't wait. He spun Sterling around and clicked the cuffs onto his wrists. "You're making a mistake," Sterling yelled as he was shoved toward a cruiser. "I work for Sterling Aviation. Call my dispatch. This is a misunderstanding." "Take the girl too," Juliana said tiredly. "Me," Clarissa shrieked. "I didn't do anything. I'm an influencer. I have 3 million followers. Then you can live stream from the precinct." Juliana said, "Officer, she is a material witness to the theft and check her bag. I believe she has a bottle of my 1982 Petrus in there." As the police escorted the screaming couple away, Juliana felt a wave of exhaustion hit her. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her shaking. Elias draped his heavy trench coat over her shoulders. "The car is waiting, ma'am. We have a private room at the signature terminal. The lawyers are already on a conference line." Juliana nodded. She looked back at the plane, her plane. It sat crookedly on the runway foam, dripping from the engine like rabies. It was damaged, perhaps badly, but it was on the ground. "Elias," she said softly. "Yes, ma'am. Find out why that engine caught fire. I have a feeling it wasn't just bad luck." The VIP lounge at Signature Flight Support in Des Moines was warm, smelling of coffee and leather. It was a stark contrast to the frozen runway. Juliana sat in a plush armchair, a mug of hot tea in her hands. She had changed out of her wet sneakers into a pair of slippers the FBO staff had graciously provided. Across from her sat a team of 3 people: Elias, a local FBI agent named Agent Miller, and on a large screen via Zoom, her legal counsel, Robert Halloway. The door opened and a police officer led Marcus Sterling into the room. He was still in handcuffs. They had removed his tie and his shoelaces. He looked smaller now, stripped of the uniform's authority. He sat down, glaring at Juliana. "You can't hold me here. I have rights. I want a lawyer." "You'll get one," Juliana said, taking a sip of tea. "But first we're going to have a little chat about logistics because right now the FBI is deciding whether to charge you with simple theft or federal air piracy. And that decision depends entirely on how honest you are in the next 5 minutes." Sterling scoffed. "Piracy? Don't be dramatic. I borrowed the jet. It's a perk of the job. Pilots do it all the time. Empty legs repositioning flights. It's a grey area." "There is nothing grey about what I found." Robert Halloway's voice boomed from the screen. "Mr. Sterling, we have accessed the Sterling aviation servers. We have cross-referenced the flight data recorder logs from N712JV with your filed flight plans for the last 6 months." Sterling swallowed hard. And Juliana interjected, picking up a stack of papers Elias had printed for her. "It seems you've been running a charter business within a charter business. You've been selling seats on my plane to third parties for cash, pocketing the money and billing my company for maintenance flights or crew training." She slid a paper across the table. "October 14th. You billed me for a 4-hour test flight to check avionics. The flight log shows you flew to Cabo San Lucas and back. Who was on board?" Marcus Sterling stayed silent, his jaw working. "We checked the manifest," Juliana continued. 4 passengers, a bachelor party. You charged them $20,000 cash." "Where did that money go?" Sterling stammered. "I needed to pay off some debts." "Look, I was going to pay it back. I was going to cut you a check once my brokerage took off." "And tonight," Juliana asked. "Miss Davenport, she's just a friend. I wanted to impress her." "You wanted to impress her so much, you kicked the owner of the plane into the jump seat," Juliana said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You humiliated me. You treated me like cargo because of how I looked, because of the color of my skin and the clothes on my back." "That's not true," Sterling protested. "I would have done that to anyone who wasn't on the manifest." "But I was on the manifest." Juliana slammed her hand on the table. "You just assumed Jay. Vance's couldn't possibly be the black woman in the hoodie. You assumed I was the help." Sterling looked down at his hands. He had no defense for that. It was the truth, and it hung in the room like smoke. "But that's not the worst part," Elias said, stepping forward. He held a tablet. "Miss Vance asked me to investigate the engine fire. I just got off the phone with the mechanic who looked at the turbine." Sterling's head snapped up. Fear, genuine and raw, filled his eyes. The engine didn't fail because of a defect, Elias said grimly. It failed because it was overdue for a hot section inspection by 200 hours. The maintenance logs at Sterling Aviation say the inspection was done last week. But the mechanic found carbon buildup that takes months to accumulate. You falsified the maintenance records, didn't you? The room went dead silent. Falsifying maintenance records wasn't just fraud. It was criminal negligence. It was attempted manslaughter. I couldn't ground the plane." Sterling whispered, tears welling in his eyes. "If I grounded it for the inspection, I would have missed the Christmas trip with Clarissa. She would have dumped me, I thought. I thought it could handle a few more hours. These engines are over-engineered. It should have been fine." Juliana stared at him, horrified. "You risked my life, your life, and your girlfriend's life for a ski trip. I didn't think it would blow." Sterling cried. "I'm a good pilot. I landed it, didn't I?" "You're a gambler," Marcus, Juliana said, standing up. "And you just lost everything." She turned to Agent Miller. "Agent, you have his confession on record. Falsifying federal aviation maintenance logs, wire fraud, grand larceny. I want to press charges on every single count." Sterling lunged forward, trying to grab her hand, but the handcuffs stopped him short. "No, please, Miss Vance, this will end my career. I'll never fly again. I have a mortgage. I have kids." You should have thought about your kids before you put a bomb in my engine, Juliana said coldly. And as for your career, it ended the moment you told me to move to the back of the bus. She nodded to the officers. Get him out of my sight. Sterling was dragged out sobbing, begging a broken man, but Juliana felt no pity, only the heavy cold weight of justice. The next morning, Christmas Day broke clear and bright over Des Moines. Juliana had spent the night at a hotel near the airport, but she hadn't slept. She had been on the phone with her legal team and the board of directors at Sterling Aviation. The fallout was nuclear. She stood in the lobby of the hotel, waiting for the rental car Elias had arranged to drive them to Chicago, where they could catch a commercial flight home. First class, obviously. Clarissa Davenport was sitting in the lobby huddled in a corner. She was wearing the same clothes as the night before, minus the mink coat which had been seized as evidence. Her makeup was smeared. She looked like a wreck. When she saw Juliana, she stood up shaky. "Miss Vance," she croaked. Juliana stopped. "Miss Davenport, I just wanted to say." Clarissa swallowed hard. "I didn't know about the plane or the maintenance or you, I know." Juliana said, "You were just a passenger with very bad taste in men. He lied to me about everything." Clarissa said, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "He told me he owned the plane. He told me he was a multi-millionaire. I posted about it. My followers, they're tearing me apart. Someone leaked the police report. They're calling me the hijackers' hooker." Juliana looked at the young woman. She was vain. Yes, shallow certainly, but she was also a victim of Sterling's sociopathic need to project an image he couldn't afford. "Clarissa Juliana," said her voice softening slightly. "You have a platform 3 million followers, right?" Clarissa nodded, wiping a tear. "Use it," Juliana advised. "Don't hide. Tell the truth. Tell them how he lied. Tell them how he risked your life for his ego. Make it a warning to other women. Reclaim the narrative." Clarissa looked at her surprised. You aren't going to sue me. You didn't steal the plane," Juliana said. "You just sat in the wrong seat. Consider this a Christmas gift. I won't include you in the civil suit against Sterling, but choose your company better next time." Juliana walked away, leaving Clarissa stunned in the lobby. Outside, the air was crisp. Elias opened the door to the SUV. "Ms. Vance," Elias said as he got in the driver's seat. "I just got off the phone with the FA. They are issuing an emergency revocation of Marcus Sterling's pilot certificate. He's grounded for life, and the FBI is charging him with interstate transportation of stolen property and reckless endangerment. He's looking at 10 to 15 years, good Juliana said, looking out the window at the flat Iowa landscape. "And Sterling Aviation?" Elias asked. "I spoke to their CEO at 4 Huntero a.m. Juliana said he was apologetic. He didn't know about Sterling's side hustle, but his lack of oversight nearly killed me. I told him I'm pulling my contract and I'm advising all my associates in the business aviation round to do the same." Clears throat. "That will bankrupt them," Elias noted. "Competence is expensive," Juliana said, closing her eyes. "But incompetence costs more. They let a wolf guard the henhouse because he looked the part. They ignored the red flags because he had the right jawline and the right charm. They are complicit." She took a deep breath. "Elias." "Yes, ma'am. Next time, let's just fly commercial, or let's get Dave back from paternity leave. Pay him triple. I'll call Dave." Elias smiled. As the car merged onto the highway, Juliana pulled out her phone. She opened Instagram. Clarissa had already posted a video. It was raw, tearful, and honest. She was detailing the lies, the fear, and the woman in the hoodie who saved them. Hatched karma. Christmas miracle. Check your pilot. Juliana liked the post. She leaned back. It wasn't the Christmas she had planned. There was no skiing, no relaxing by the fire. But as she watched the snow-covered fields roll by, she realized she had received a different kind of gift. She had cleaned house. She had removed a cancer from her life she didn't even know existed. And she had reminded the world and herself that power doesn't wear a uniform. It doesn't need to shout. It just needs to be right. 6 months had passed since the incident in Des Moines, but for Marcus Sterling, time had stopped the moment those handcuffs clicked shut. The federal courthouse in Newark, New Jersey, was a fortress of limestone and granite, imposing enough to crush the spirit of any man walking through its doors. Inside courtroom 4B, the air was stale recycled and heavy with the scent of impending doom. Juliana Vance sat in the front row of the gallery, her posture perfect. She wore a navy blue power suit, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wasn't there to testify today. That had been done weeks ago. She was there to watch the end. Marcus Sterling sat at the defense table. The transformation was shocking. The handsome, arrogant pilot who had sipped Dom Perignon at 40,000 FT was gone. In his place sat a gaunt, greying man in an ill-fitting suit. His salt and pepper hair was thinning, and his hands, once steady enough to thread a needle with a Gulf ream, were trembling uncontrollably. The trial had been a media circus. The narrative of the billionaire in the jump seat had gone viral globally. Clarissa Davenport's testimony had been the nail in the coffin painting. Sterling, not as a lover, but as a manipulative narcissist who used women and planes as props for his ego. But the real damage had been done by the National Transportation Safety Board (TSB) report. The prosecutor, a sharp-witted woman named Assistant U.S. Attorney Reynolds, stood up for her closing statement. She held the thick NTSB report like a weapon. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury." Reynolds began, her voice echoing in the silent room. "The defense wants you to believe that Marcus Sterling is a hero. They want you to focus on the landing in Des Moines. They want you to applaud him for not crashing." She paused, walking over to the jury box. "But you don't applaud an arsonist for putting out the fire he started. The evidence is irrefutable. Marcus Sterling forged maintenance logbook entries for N7F12JV on 3 separate occasions. He bypassed critical safety checks on the engine turbines to keep the aircraft available for his personal unauthorized charters. He turned a marvel of engineering into a ticking time bomb." Reynolds turned and pointed a finger directly at Sterling. He flinched. He stole 450,000 tons in flight time from Vance Holloway Dynamics. He defrauded his employer Sterling Aviation. But his greatest crime was his supreme arrogance. He looked at Ms. Vance, the owner of the aircraft, and decided she was unworthy of safety, unworthy of respect, and unworthy of her own property simply because of her appearance. He gambled with 4 lives because he believed he was untouchable. Today, you must show him that gravity comes for us all. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood up. Juliana didn't blink. "We find the defendant Marcus Sterling guilty on all counts." The judge, a no-nonsense man named Judge Hatcher, looked over his spectacles at Sterling. "Mr. Sterling, in my 20 years on the bench, I have rarely seen a case of such profound professional negligence. You held a position of public trust. Pilots are guardians of life. You abdicated that duty for vanity. Please, Your Honor." Sterling choked out, standing up. "I lost my license. I lost my home. My wife left me. I have nothing left. You have your life," Judge Hatcher said coldly, "which is more than you gave your passengers a right to expect. I sentence you to 144 months in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. You are also ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $1.2 million to Vance Holloway Dynamics. 12 years. As the bailiffs moved in to take him away, Sterling turned to look at the gallery, his eyes locked with Juliana's. He looked for mercy, for pity, for some sign that she felt bad for destroying him. Juliana simply nodded a slow, deliberate acknowledgement of the transaction being completed.